Every year, the NBA draft rolls around, and every year, the Los Angeles Lakers seem to do a very good job. This upcoming season, it will be Jalen Hood-Schifino and Maxwell Lewis in the purple and gold. Starting with Hood-Schifino at 17, the Indiana guard is arguably the silkiest ball handler in this year's draft class. I've described JHS as sort of a master in the pick and roll because he's a highly capable pull-up shooter as well as a passer out of screens. In his one and only season in college, Hood-Schifino made 42% of his two-point jumpers, despite taking a ridiculous amount of these shots. They made up half of his shot diet, but defenses still were never able to figure out how to stop Hood-Schifino. The IU product can use either side of the floor, but he is very much reliant on screens still. Thankfully for him, the Lakers should have plenty of pick-and-roll partners for Hood-Schifino. Rob Pelinka rightfully pointed to his strong positional size at the 1, which allows Jalen to see over the top of defenses and find his teammates. We saw this past season with D'Angelo Russell how the Lakers can value this type of player, and I think JHS is comparable. His biggest improvement point is no doubt going to be getting to the basket, not just scoring there, but also generating shots there. He can offset this with his floater, which we saw time and time again in college, but more will be needed at the NBA level. Looking ahead, Hood-Schifino will also face a challenge adjusting to a bigger role away from the ball. Playing with Tracy Jackson-Davis at Indiana prepared him for this in a way since the center was the one initiating plays a lot of the time. But with the Lakers, not only is Hood-Schifino a rookie, but he's coming into a team with LeBron James, Anthony Davis, potentially Austin Reeves, and other ball handlers. I'm confident that JHS is going to be fine in the long run, but in the short term, I want to see him become a more consistent spot-up shooter. Hood-Schifino has the touch, so it will be about rhythm and reps for him. He can still stand to take even more threes, and he has to prove that his soft touch has NBA range. At Indiana, Hood-Schifino took 111 threes, and he made 33% of them. So really, it's going to be ironing both of those things out. His shooting from deep, which must go up in volume and efficiency, and then, like I said, at the basket as well, where less than 20% of his total shots came at the rim in college. His volume was low, clearly, and so was his efficiency. Hood-Schifino is at best an average athlete. He relies much more on coordination, craft, and handle, and he's not at all an aggressive driver, so he'll be having to adjust to that while facing the bigger, better, stronger, and longer defenders of the NBA. The Lakers drafted Pepperdine scorer Maxwell Lewis with the 40th pick. Lewis, who the Lakers are familiar with locally, worked out with the team in late May. I think he's going to need more patience than Hood-Schifino, but at the same time, the flashes that Lewis shows are truly intriguing. I had a first-round grade on the Pepperdine prospect, largely because I believe in his potential as a 3-level scorer. There's a lot to build on still, both in terms of efficiency and process, but I think it's very important to highlight that Lewis is relatively early into his basketball journey. His pre-college process, much like Marjon Beauchamp from the Bucks, was severely affected by the pandemic, so much so that it poured into his freshman season at Pepperdine. And even this past season, he played on a pretty good team, but he wasn't picking up the best on-court habits all year long in terms of shot selection or defense. Lewis is a creative scorer, but his efficiency fell off around halfway through the season once defenses focused in on him. The new Laker finished his sophomore season averaging a strong 17 points, but without necessarily being reliable or efficient from anywhere on the floor. Lewis's usage rate was probably too high for where he's at right now, but the good news is that he's going to get to progress under less pressure now, probably with the South Bay Lakers. In the long run, Los Angeles can totally use someone off the bench who can create their own bucket. We've seen that recently with different player types like Malik Monk or Carmelo Anthony, but for now, Lewis would not be able to fulfill that role to the standard required from a championship contender. This is even more so the case down the other end of the floor on defense, in my opinion, where Lewis maybe one day will be able to guard multiple positions, but right now, he is very undisciplined, unfocused, and he needs a lot of work here. I expect him to get plenty of reps in the G League, which is a great thing considering how the Lakers have developed prospects as of late. Colin Castleton did not get drafted by the Lakers, but he got picked up right after the NBA draft wrapped up, and I think he can be a smart addition. The Lakers have been unafraid to explore the later stages of the draft or even the undrafted free agent market, as is the case here in recent times. No doubt Austin Reeves is the biggest success story, but also think of Alex Caruso, who the Lakers ended up signing a year after he went undrafted. Even others like Ivica Zubac, Talen Horton-Tucker, or Svi Mykhailiuk fit that bill. This year, I'm looking at the Florida center as someone who went undrafted but has a real shot of establishing himself in the NBA. Castleton was pretty dominant in college, playing 5 seasons, 2 at Michigan, and then 3 at Florida where he really broke out. The Gators' big averaged 16 points and 3 blocks per game this season, but I want to focus more on how this might translate to the NBA. On offense, the important thing is that Castleton is not a stiff. He's not an outside shooter by any means, but he is a good free throw shooter in the mid-70s on high volume. Then he can get his in the post, but he also isn't necessarily a center who can only play in the low block. Castleton can operate with the action in front of him, and he's able to put the ball on the floor for short dribbles at around 7 feet tall. The 23-year-old has soft touch, finishing 67% of his 159 shots near the basket this year, and he's going to be able to act as a play finisher in the pick and roll, in the dunker spot, or really just whenever he's stationed around the basket. I also think that Castleton can play make a little bit with the ball in his hands. The Florida big has experience running dribble handoffs or creating space for his teammates, and I thought the G League Elite Draft Combine Camp gave us a glimpse of how this might look in the NBA. Like we saw at the top of this section, Castleton is fairly mobile. The challenge in the NBA is that he's going to need to defend in space much more often, particularly against quicker guards who are also able to create their own shots. But he's huge, he times himself very well, and I think most likely the Lakers are going to want him in drop coverage. Very briefly, I'm also curious about Alex Fudge, but in the very long term. The Lakers picked him up on an Exhibit 10 deal, which is a 1-year minimum that can then be flipped into a 2-way contract. In other words, there's a good chance that Fudge plays with the South Bay Lakers this season, and he's a very fringy signing to keep an eye on. The 20-year-old played his freshman year at LSU before transferring to Florida for his final year in college. He's in the mold of an athletic wing, but he is just so raw, especially on the offensive end, since Fudge cannot reliably score at all. In his 2 years playing college basketball, the Florida native averaged less than 5 points per game, and he has to be able to shoot the 3-ball, but you cannot count on that at all. Fudge flashes more promise as a defensive playmaker, but again, it's all very much theoretical, and it would take years to develop. Still, I'm curious to see how Fudge pans out, and I think it's worth tracking him just in case, since the NBA is always looking for these hidden wing types wherever they can find them.